Tonight, we are breaking from our regular routine to have a Christmas special, as is kind of a fun tradition in other programs. So I figured I might as well do one myself. I can't guarantee it'll be as good as the Star Wars holiday special of great infamy, but I will do my best. All right, so tonight we're going to leave aside the question of the development of the idea and what Israel was what we've been studying in chapter 8 of the book, The Religion of the Apostles, and just take a little side journey through the iconographic and hymnographic tradition of the Orthodox Church when it comes to the Nativity. And I'm going to show you how it plugs in, hopefully, to all these kind of things we've been talking about and that are discussed in the Religion of the Apostles. Because one of the reasons that I felt it was important to teach this book and to really go deep into this book is because everything that it's talking about is stuff that's hiding in plain sight. But because of centuries of kind of development and thought away from that first century, very often it's just kind of missed, even though it's still there playing. And what Orthodox Christianity does is it preserves the memory of a lot of what we're talking about, this first century Christianity, Second Temple Judaism, and so forth, is preserved in the hymnography and in the iconography. But even there, for Orthodox Christians, it is often hiding in plain sight because they don't know the history and they don't know the context. So we could spend a whole series of classes on the Nativity. It's one of the greatest feasts of the church. It has incredibly rich tradition, but I'm just going today focus on one hymn and then we'll end with another, but end with one hymn just so that we can get a grounding in it for our Christmas special. And that is what's called the Troparion of the Nativity. And in the Orthodox Church, a standard hymn is called a Troparion. The word is related to the English word trope, right? A kind of a standard form. So a Troparion is just a standard formed hymn of the Nativity. It's usually in tone 4. We sing it at St. Mary's in both the Russian style and in Byzantine. In Byzantine chant, it would sound like this. Your nativity, O Christ our God, has shown to the world the light of wisdom. For by it those who worship the stars were taught by a star to adore you, the Son of Righteousness, and to know you, the Orient from on high. O Lord, glory to you. There's a lot going on in that hymn. And we're going to talk about kind of each of the kernels that is in that hymn. What we're not going to talk about tonight, which would be fun to do, but has been done by others and probably better than I could with the short amount of time I had to get this class ready this week, is we're not going to talk about, well, did Jesus Christ actually get born in December? Was there some kind of bizarre comet in the sky at the time of his birth? What was going on? There's a whole bunch of really, and they're all very interesting, and they're all very neat, and they're all worth talking about. But they've been done elsewhere by others better than I can do it tonight. So I'm gonna leave those aside. But one thing I want to mention for those who aren't maybe at St. Mary's or even if they didn't read my newsletter for the month of December, I talked about in the month of December when Christmas came to be a church holiday. Because, of course, Christians celebrated the fact that Jesus was incarnate, born, and came into the world from the very beginning. But at what point did they actually celebrate Christmas liturgically as its own unique feast? And it may be surprising to you to discover that it actually wasn't until the 4th century. About the mid to late 4th century, Nativity started being celebrated in different parts of the empire, and by the end of the 4th century, it was being celebrated in Constantinople, which at that point pretty much makes it an imperial feast, and then it becomes something normative for the rest of the church in that time period, because once it's celebrated at the great church in Constantinople, that's where the kind of the great liturgical formation is being done. But it's already being celebrated elsewhere. Now, the reason that I hypothesized in my newsletter, if you read it, you know what it is, that it wasn't until Constantine and Helen went into the Holy Land and started reclaiming all these special sites, like the Holy Sepulchre, the areas around Mount Tabor, the Holy City in general, but also Bethlehem, and repurposed them for Christian worship by building churches. Most of these places for about 300 years, 175 years, if I want to be very exact, maybe less than that, 160 years, had been paganized, because after the Bar Kokhba revolt, Jerusalem was, the Holy Land had been de-Judified basically by the Romans. It had been seriously Romanized, and all those places had been built with pagan temples. So from AD 70, the destruction of the temple, to about AD, 150, 155, somewhere around there, when the revolt that takes place. That's like the end of Judea as an entity. And then it becomes a Roman province, completely paganized as much as possible. Jews were still living there, but it was very tamped down. So it's not until 325, whenever it was, that Constantine and Helen do their mission to the Helen goes to Jerusalem and so forth. And so it's probably around 340 or so, 350, that the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem is built. And after that, that's when you start celebrating it as its own feast day, because you're celebrating this church. The church is dedicated to the Nativity. There's nowhere else, no other church that had been dedicated to the Nativity like that before. Churches previously, and I think I might have mentioned this last time, but churches previously were dedicated primarily to martyrs. They were built over the relics or the bones or the place of martyrs. So Church of the Apostles, Church of Eleftherios, all the early churches were kind of coming out of that catacomb process, right? Over the tombs of the saints. And only later do we have these development of churches and holidays connected with events other than Pascha and Pentecost and so forth. So long story short, Nativity as a liturgical practice in Christianity comes into existence mid to late 4th century, and very quickly develops the hymnographical tradition and iconographic tradition that goes along with it. Not surprisingly, and if you look at it, you'll still see it today in the Orthodox structures, it's very derivative. And it's most of it modeled on kind of its parallels to Pascha and to the resurrection. It also bears witness to say that until 350 to 390, the Christians, when they celebrated Nativity, were doing it in conjunction with the baptism of the Lord on Holy Theophany. That had been done since the 2nd century. And in the West, Theophany is called Epiphany, and it's their celebration of the adoration of the Magi. In the East, Theophany was both the birth of Christ and his baptism, because it effectively is the beginning of his life and his ministry together. And in the East, then what happens is that Nativity is pulled out from Theophany, brought to December 25th. The Sunday after Nativity becomes the Sunday of the Adoration of the Magi in the East. And then January 6th remains the Theophany. Okay, so that's what's taking place there. In the West, I don't even know if they celebrate the baptism of the Lord separately. Do they?
Yeah.
Is it a big deal? It's probably not a big deal.
No, it is a big deal. It's a Sunday of obligation. It may have originally been on a weekday as well. It may have had a calendar day. But I believe that it's January 1st
So that's the circumcision of the Lord in our tradition,
Right.
the eighth
I
day.
think it used to be the circumcision of the Lord in their tradition and became baptism.
Ah, interesting. So if you look that's very interesting. You see, it's like its own.
Remember, I'm saying I think.
You think, and it sounds legit. But in the East, if you look at it, actually, still to this day, theophany is the bigger service. It has the bigger liturgical flourish, and it's really, I would say, theophany is second only to Pascha. It's that significant. And the way you kind of measure these things generally is the number of Old Testament readings and the fact that it has things like royal hours. So Pascha has royal hours service, Theophany has royal hours, Christmas has royal hours, but Theophany was probably the service that came first. So in any case, all of these themes, I want you throughout what we're looking at tonight to look for parallels in terms of images, themes, structures for the advanced students, Pajovian hierarchies, symbolism, basically. Symbolism that you're going to see, especially in the icons, as well as in some of the language using, but primarily in the language. So take a good feel and a good look at this icon while we're sitting here, and you'll see. Also remember, I made the point in my article, the original understanding of the place where Christ was born was in a cave. Only in the Middle Ages did they start doing the whole stable scene as a wooden building, because they didn't have caves, obviously, and they were building 3D structures, so it's hard to do that with a cave. Where they would have kept animals and had the manger and all that type of stuff in the first century is understood to be a cave, and the place where they built the Church of the Nativity was built over the cave of the Nativity. That's where they understood it to be, and it was only that short period of time that they had that. Somebody's got a chat here. Jennifer, Solemnity of Mary, January 1st, Ascension of Jesus, May 26. These are a whole bunch of things. So his baptism is not, it's not a big deal. It's certainly not as big of a deal as in the Orthodox Church. It's a huge deal. It's more important than Christmas for Orthodox Christians. And that's not because Orthodox Christians celebrate Christmas on January 7th. I will just rant aside. Orthodox Christians do not celebrate Christmas on January 7th, but most of them, the majority of them, celebrate on the old calendar December 25th, which happens to be January 7th on the new calendar.
Right.
But it is December 25th on both calendars. January 6th on the old calendar then is January 19th. And that's, if I'm not mistaken, I think the Armenians still celebrate Christmas that late. They haven't separated it. So that shows you that how late it was of a separation, that you still see that preserved in some of the other churches. But I might be wrong. About that. And they're non-Chalcedonian, but it's because they were early. They were Christian before the Roman Empire, around 300, right, before Constantine. So.
But I wonder if the other non-Chalcedonians do the same.
No, because they have their own traditions. Just because they're non-Chalcedonian doesn't mean they're that united. They're very divergent in terms of liturgical practice because it's broad ethnic variety going on there. Yeah, and actually, our December 25th probably came out of Egypt. Probably came out of the Egyptian tradition. There's a whole other. I said I wasn't going to talk about the dating of Christmas, but it's an area which it's a rabbit hole that I love to jump into. Okay. Took us a while to get through one slide. Okay, so a lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight, I stole liberally, as I do, from our main teacher of this course, which is Father Stephen DeYoung. He wrote the book on the Religion of the Apostles, which this class has been about. That book itself is actually mostly stuff just repackaged from his blog, The Whole Counsel of God, which is a Bible study blog. And one of the sections on that I don't know if it actually made it into the Religion of the Apostles, I don't think it did, was his little talk on Christmas, where he connects it to the writings of St. Ignatius. So we're going to look at St. Ignatius which Father Stephen brought to my attention for this purpose. In the Epistle to the Ephesians, so this is early 2nd century as well, so first 2 decades of the 2nd century. For our God, Jesus the Christ, was conceived in the womb by Mary according to a dispensation of the seed of David, but also of the Holy Ghost. And he was born and was baptized, that by his passion he might cleanse water. So this was in this time period. Again, the baptism and the birth were kind of conjoined in terms of how they recognized and thought about them, because they're part of that same coming to life, right? In chapter 19, and hidden from the prince of this world were the virginity of Mary, her childbearing, and likewise also the death of the Lord. 3 mysteries to be cried aloud, to be proclaimed, that which were wrought in the silence of God. So these 3 mysteries, the virginity, the birth, and the death of Christ, are 3 mysteries which are now, of course, proclaimed in our faith, but also conjoined. And so I put this beautiful icon of the entombment. Does it look familiar? Right? It's almost the same structure as the nativity icon. Instead of the Virgin, giving birth, she's laying him not in a manger, but in the tomb, in the cave. And it's a similar structure, and it's a cave-like structure. The angels are watching, et cetera, et cetera. So you see that there's a distinct intentional correlation being made between both the birth and the death of Christ, the tomb and the womb being conjoined here. And this is a point that Father Stephen makes, that St. Ignatius uses this phrasing of mysteries. So we're going to look into the mysteries, because the Troparian talks about this by saying, he dawned unto the world the light of understanding, or showed on them the light of wisdom. What is that about? That's about the revealing of the mystery that was hidden before all ages, right? We sing about this in the Dismissal Theotokian of Tone 4 at the Vespers. So you'll hear it very often in the Orthodox Church, the mystery hidden from all ages. This is itself taken from the language of the New Testament. St. Paul writes, however, we speak among those who are mature, yet not the wisdom of this age, nor of the rulers of this age who are coming to nothing. But we speak the wisdom of God in a mystery, the hidden wisdom which God ordained before the ages for our glory, which none of the rulers of this age knew, for they had known, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. Who are the rulers of this age?
Gods, like the fallen angels.
The fallen angels, the so-called gods, the gods who are not God by nature, the gods of this world, the God of this world, all of these terms that are used in the New Testament, the demonic forces, the pagan deities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So a big part of the Christmas story is, we have domesticated it, but there's a whole lot of demon spanking happening in the Christmas story. There's a whole lot of upending the powers of a world enslaved to darkness that is taking place. We've turned it into a Hallmark card, just like we did with Noah's Ark, extinction level event used to decorate your child's nursery rooms. We've tamed it. So we need to reclaim the Christmas story for the immense reality that is. Now here's the icon of the crucifixion. They would not have crucified the Lord of glory. Again, St. Paul identifies, just like St. Ignatius, that Christ is Yahweh. This is the Lord of glory, is not some new guy who showed up. It's the guy that we had been hearing about and seeing and talking to throughout the Old Testament. And you'll see in this beautiful icon, I like this icon, it's rare. Most icons of the crucifixion depict daytime. This one is a rare one which depicts the stars and the night, because of course the sun hid its rays. So what happens when the sun hides its rays? You see the stars, right? You can see the star, which we never think about, but because we assume it must have been cloudy. That's how it happened, right? But here you see also the angels once again, the similar structures of the mountains coming up there. And then, of course, the tomb at the bottom, because Christ is crucified at Golgotha, the place of the skull, which was understood to be the tomb of Adam. And the skull was Adam's skull. So you see the symbolism taking place here. Instead of shepherds and wise men, of course, you have the myrrh-bearing women, the wise centurion, you have the apostles and so forth. So there's parallels going on here as well with this icon and this imagery here. St. Paul in Ephesians 3 speaks about this mystery. To me, who am less than the least of all the saints, this grace was given that I should preach among the nations, the Gentiles, the unsearchable riches of Christ, and to make all see what is the economia. It's translated in the New King James Fellowship, which is a bad translation. Dispensation would have been a better one, but economia is the term. Stewardship you could use. The economy of the mystery is clunky sounding, but more literally correct, I guess. Which from the beginning of the ages has been hidden in God, who created all things through Christ Jesus, to the intent that now the manifold wisdom or the multifaceted wisdom of God might be made known by the church to the principalities and powers in the heavenly places. So there was a mystery hidden from the ages about God's plan of salvation. The devil knew that he didn't like whatever God was up to, and obviously knew that it had something to do with mankind and was trying to save mankind, and had been causing a lot of hijinks, to ensue to our detriment and to our eternal death in many cases. But now, through Christ Jesus, he has revealed his dispensation. He has revealed his plan. And interestingly, he says here, it's not just about preaching the gospel to people. It's also what? To reveal the mystery to the principalities and powers. Because the gospel understood, if you've followed some of the classes we've talked about, but if you've read, say, Father Andrew Damick's book on Arise, O God, I think is the title of it. What is the gospel? In Evangelion in Greek was the term used for a proclamation of victory. When a king came and conquered a land, he would come into that land and send his heralds, and those heralds would pronounce the gospel, the Evangelion, which said, happy news, you are no longer under that terrible king, you're now under this king, and he's going to be great, as long as you ... right? And for the pagan kings, it wasn't always good news. It was like, as long as you give half of your wealth or whatever, or start paying a higher tax rate or whatever it is, sell your first child into slavery. But with Christ, the good news is exactly that. It is the good news. It is the tyrant that you were suffering under for all of these millennia, centuries and millennia, has now been defeated, and the kingdom of God has been ushered in. And so this is a proclamation which is not only to man, but it is also to the heavenly hosts. It is a proclamation to all those gods and demons and powers and angels that fell to say, you're done. It's over. So there's something going on with this happening at Christmas. There's a reason that angels are involved at both this and then again at the resurrection, right? The proclaiming of a mystery.
Is that that must be why Paul says, we're a spectacle to angels and to men, we're a spectacle.
A spectacle, yeah. To the angels, why to the angels? Wouldn't the angels be like, yeah, go on, good for you? Not all the angels were on our side, as we've seen. St. Paul in 2 Corinthians 4, but even if our gospel is veiled, it's kind of hidden, it is veiled to those who are perishing, whose minds the God of this age, who's that? The devil, right? Satan, whose minds the God of this age has blinded, who do not believe, lest the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine on them. For it is the God who commanded light to shine out of darkness, who is shown in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. So this is, again, connecting to what that Troparian hymn is talking about, dawning upon them the light of wisdom, showing to them all of this. There needs to be a proclamation both to mankind and to the demons, because it is about defeating the blindness caused by Satan. It is to disarm principalities and powers. It is to destroy the works of the devil. It is to set free the captives. It is to bring light to those who sat in darkness, right? That's why also you hear all of this language happening in Theophany as well. Theophany is also the same idea. It's a festival of light. It literally means God manifesting or God appearing. Theophany, Theophanos. It's the coming forth of the light. So, back to Ignatius now. Now, this is a cool icon. Again, a different nativity icon, but one that really kind of gets into what we're talking about here. Here, really highlighting the angelic aspects of it. It's got all the little different things that are taking place. The flight into Egypt on the left, the dream of Joseph, the shepherds, and then in the corner, the wise men. We'll take a look at that icon in a detail later. But notice the center of this icon is the star that is coming down and shining on. That's actually interesting that that's the center of the icon, and it's funneled down through these ranks of heavenly angels that are all now engaged. What is that all about? What's going on there? St. Ignatius says, how then, I can barely read this, let me see here. How then were they made manifest to the ages? A star shone forth in the heaven above all the stars, and its light was unutterable, and its strangeness caused amazement. And all the rest of the constellations with the sun and the moon formed themselves into a chorus about the star. But the star itself far outshined them all. And there was perplexity to know whence this strange appearance came, which was so unlike them. So this is St. Ignatius writing about the Christmas story, just a little bit over 100 years after itself. And it's a very profound kind of cosmology that he's using here. But notice the rest of the constellations, the sun and the moon. What? What's going on there? Well, from Linus, right? It's a Charlie Brown Christmas, right? About the story of the Nativity. Suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly hosts, praising God and saying, glory to God in the highest heaven, peace on earth, goodwill to men. Again, going back to our class on angels and stars, and if you've read the chapter in Father Stephen DeYoung's book, the ancients understood that the stars in the heavens were not just, they didn't think of them as balls of gas, they saw them as lights, and they assumed that they represented or were somehow connected with powers, angelic powers. So the stars were synonymous with angels. For the pagans, they were synonymous with the gods. And in fact, the planets were understood to be a special kind of star, and because they were the special stars, they were the wandering stars. That's what the word planetary means wandering. And for those specific stars, they gave the kind of the highlights to the greatest gods, right? So Jupiter, Venus, Mars, etc., Mercury, Saturn. Those were the main ones, then plus the sun and the moon. They didn't know about poor old Pluto. Neptune and Uranus may not have been recognized yet, but I think this is like seven. The 5 planets and the sun and the moon were the 7 wandering stars. That's why we have 7 candle branch stand and all that kind of stuff.
The outer planets were discovered by telescope.
By telescope, right. So St. Ignatius can talk about the sun and the moon and the stars and the constellations becoming a chorus around that one star, because when he reads heavenly hosts, he's not making a jump there. That's for him synonymous. He's understanding that angelic powers and celestial bodies are referencing the same thing. So it's kind of a neat little thing. And of course, this is an incredible thing to say in the ancient world, because if you're a pagan, you think the sun and the moon, the planets and the constellations represent your gods. So to say that they have all bowed themselves down to this one star that is heralding the coming of the Messiah is tantamount to saying that your gods are done. They quit their whatever job they might have had. They don't have it anymore. And so remember that the big danger for the ancient Israelites was that they would worship those stars as gods. And so in Deuteronomy 4:19, we've heard this several times in previous classes. Take heed lest you lift your eyes to heaven, and when you see the sun, the moon, and the stars, all the hosts of heaven, you feel driven to worship them and serve them, which the Lord your God has given to all the peoples under the whole heaven as a heritage. So those stars were meant to be, for a while, maybe the gods of the Gentiles. That seems to be a possibility when we look after the Tower of Babel, but clearly they were meant to be the guides, not the gods, the guardians, not the acceptors of worship. And that was part of that fall that took place of the angels. So Christmas then comes in as a complete reversal of, when we talk about astrology, astrology as such has had many different kind of levels of meaning, but astrology in the sense of star worship has been completely brought to an end. Therefore, those who worshipped a star worshipped the stars, were taught by a star to adore you, the Son of Righteousness. So that's where we get that part in there. Not simply because the wise men might have been of a particular brand. Different traditions talk about the wise men as being maybe just because magi was the term for pagan, Zoroastrian priest from Persia, the Majus. But other traditions suggest that they were from three different areas, representing kind of the three different ancient civilizations, Egypt, Persia, and then Babylon, so that would have kind of shown the whole totality of ancient Near Eastern civilization coming together in this one moment to also bow down before Christ. In any case, St. Ignatius can say, on the basis of this mystery of revelation taking place, from that time forward, every sorcery and every spell was dissolved. The ignorance of wickedness vanished away. The ancient kingdom was pulled down, the kingdom of the devil, when God appeared in the likeness of man unto the newness of everlasting life. And that which had been perfected in the counsels of God began to take effect. The counsels of God, this is not, again, simply God's own thoughts, but also maybe the divine counsel, which is a different counsel, but the idea of when he talks with his angels, what shall we do, right? Well, who shall we send, etc., etc. Thence all things were perturbed because the abolishing of death was taken in hand. So Christmas is the beginning of the end of death. It's the beginning of the end of the destruction of the kingdom of the devil and Hades. That's what's taking place when the stars start crying out, glory to God in the highest heaven. It seems like, oh, that's cute. It's nice. Angels are singing. It's like, ta-da, it's a musical. No, it's a heavy metal symphonic chorus of blistering, face-melting, cosmos-changing reality. That's what's happening at Christmas. When the shepherds hear this is not like, oh, that's nice. It's just like, oh my gosh, the world is changing. The world that we knew is coming to an end. Everything, like in the movie Science, everything they wrote in science books is going to change. And that's basically what happened, right? Everything they said in history class is about to change. Now, St. John Chrysostom also talks about this. Now, jump ahead from St. John Chrysostom is now you're jumping about 300 years forward from St. Ignatius. So this is now by the time that Christmas is now being celebrated as a holiday. And this is from St. John Chrysostom's homily on the Gospel of St. Matthew, and he's going to talk about this star. What is the meaning of the star? Again, a nice icon which depicts the heavenly hosts above, watching over all these things and kind of depicting the firmament and all the layers there of the cosmology. He says, whether it was a star by nature or a star in appearance only. So he's kind of recognizing this distinction in the ancient world, right? We shall easily know the other things also. Whence then will these points be manifest? From the very things that are written. Thus, that this star was not of the common sort, or rather not a star at all, as it seems at least to me, but some invisible power transformed into this appearance. So not to go off like, well, he makes the case, it doesn't behave like a star. So you could say, well, maybe it was a comet, right? That's one of the theories that's out there. And that's an interesting theory. But St. John Chrysostom is making a point that it's not even a natural phenomenon. It's a supernatural power of some sort that's manifesting, making itself apparent in this context. And its first place is evident from its very course, the fact that it moves the way it does. For there is not any star that moves by this way, whether it be in the sun you mentioned, or the moon, or all the other stars. We see them going from east to west, but this wafted from north to south, for so is Palestine situated with respect to Persia, or even, I guess it is kind of east to west though, so I don't know. That might not be a great argument, St. John. Anyway, he goes on and makes the point, and that's clear, that the star, the fact that it stops and it stays, right, in one place. Here's another highlight of that icon of the three magi. This one showing them rushing on their horses. So, in the nativity scenes, they're very kind of static, right? But this one is a nice energetic image. They're all rushing and they're chasing that star as they're pointing and looking towards it and moving towards it. They're trying to get to it. St. John says, why did God work through such a weird vision? And why did he appeal to pagan magi? Why did he go to pagans and not to the Jews? Well, he said the Jews had the prophets, and they either listened to them or they didn't. And in the time of Herod, they weren't really paying attention to them. So God had to kind of poke and say, hey, even the pagans are noticing something is going on here. Pay attention, right? So he says, wherefore one may say, did he attract the wise men by such a vision? How should he have done? Sent prophets? But the magi would not have submitted to the prophets. Should he have uttered a voice from above? Nay, they would have not attended. Sent an angel, but even him they would have hurried by. The wise men were men with important things to do, and they had to be reached in the language and in the area of interest that would have captured their attention. And as astrologers, that was the way to do it. So send them an angel, send them a prophet, speak to them from above. They would have been like, we're men of science, essentially. We need something that we will listen to. We study the stars. That's essentially what they were. And so for this cause, dismissing all those means, God calls them by the things that are familiar to them, in exceeding condescension. And he shows a large and extraordinary star, so as to astonish them, both at the greatness and beauty of its appearance and the manner of its course. And so this is how God, this is a good lesson for all of us, of course, because I think this is what God does for us. He speaks to us through the things that are where we're at. I mean, one of the great things, we had our wonderful talk at DocsCon with Father Turbo, where he talked about, the reading stories of anti-heroes, which characters that you would never associate with the gospel, but it was those characters and only those characters that at the time could have reached him where he was. And I could totally relate to that. Like, you needed the heavy metal fantasy hero to get you to wake up and say, there's something more that I need to be attending to. There's something important and worth giving your life for, and so forth. And it was through that kind of thing. So for the wise men, they had to be reached where they were at, which was in their obsession with the study of the stars and planets and so forth.
Father,
But, yeah,
that's the way God always works. He told the disciples to become fishers of men. And when you are fishing, you need to use the right bait. And Jesus did that when he was speaking with the woman at the well. He used the right bait to talk to her. And this is what he's using here too.
mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah. And you could take that, because that language is also used for the whole principle of how the economy of salvation, that Christ baited the hook with his own flesh as Christ, so that the dragon fish, the Leviathan of death, would swallow and take the bait. But in that flesh was contained his divinity that would expunge everything within death's stomach and force it to vomit forth all the dead back to life. And so the resurrection is a wonderful image of fish vomit. So, but it all had to do with the bait. You use the right bait, you can get death to vomit up the dead. All right. So in most of the icons of the Nativity, then you will, or the adoration of the Magi, you will also see an angel, even though angels were not necessarily described in the visitation of the Magi. Here's a particular image where you see the angels standing right next to the Virgin and Christ child saying, okay, here she is, right? And so this is how St. John describes this. Think it not therefore unworthy of him to have called them by a star, since by the same rule you will find fault with all the Jewish rites also. This is very interesting. The sacrifices, the purifications, the new moons, and the ark, and the temple too itself, for even these derive their origin from Gentile grossness. Now, that may scandalize you, but we've been looking at exactly how that is in this class, because we have seen how what God was doing with all of these things was taking what pagans were doing and then just tweaking them or inverting them in just the right way to say, you're not there, you're doing it upside down. Do it like this, right? Worship the God, not the creation. And so all of those things, the temple, the ark, were not unique to Judaism or to the ancient church in the Old Testament. They were copying in many respects what the other nations were doing, but doing them in an inverted way or in a way that would change the whole dynamic and direct them towards God instead. Yet for all that, God, for the salvation of them that were in error, endured to be served by these things. He accepted to have these star worshipers follow a star, right? Thinking that they were following just another version of their own beliefs, I guess. Whereby those without were used to serve devils, only he slightly altered them, that he might draw them off by degrees from their customs and lead them towards the highest wisdom. So God takes those things which even at one time served the devils, and just tweaking them gets them so that it can be bringing people to serve the higher wisdom, right? And like you said, this is the bait, using the right bait and getting people right onto the right track. Just so he did this in the case of the wise men, not disdaining to call them by the sight of a star, that he might lift them higher ever after, beyond the stars. Therefore, after he has brought them, leading them by the hand, and has set them by the manger, it is no longer by a star, but by an angel that he now discourses unto them. Thus did they little by little become better men. So this is, I don't recall an angel appearing in the story as such, talking to wise men. They talked to Herod and he was no angel, but they came to the manger and they offered their gifts. What is the angel discoursing unto them? It's a very interesting thing, but it's a tradition which you see preserved in the iconography, that the star that they followed when it came and stood over the place where the young child lay, in essence, manifested itself as an angelic being instead.
Didn't the angel tell them not to go back and see Herod?
Oh, yeah, you're right. So
Uh-huh.
afterwards, yeah, very good.
Father, this is Elaine.
Yeah,
My understanding is that although St. John Chrysostom talks about the manger, that actually the wise men really didn't get to Mary when they were still in the cave, because it took such a long time for them to make the trip, that Jesus was quite a bit older.
yeah, I'd have to go back and see if there's been some kind of, maybe St. John is just harmonizing there. I'm not sure, but I know it's part of two different kind of storylines, so it might line up or it might not. Sorry, I can't think on the fly on that one for you.
The other thing is that we all say that the star led them, but the star didn't lead them immediately. The star took them to Herod. And it was when Herod had people look through the scriptures, the prophecies of the scriptures told them exactly where to go. That's when the star took them to Bethlehem, and not before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a necessary stop on the way that they be illumined by the prophets, right? That they understand what it was that they were being led towards. It's a good point. Okay, so this gets us through the light of wisdom, those taught by a star, to worship a star, the Son of Righteousness. Now we're going to talk about the Orient from on high, which is also part of that hymn. So the word Orient, if you know your terms, just means the east. So the east or eastward. The Lord God planted a garden eastward. Anatolos is the Greek word used in the Septuagint, from which we get the term Anatolia, which is a part of Asia Minor, right? It's the eastern part of Turkey, essentially. It's difficult land to be in, but that's that part. And there he put the man whom he had formed. We see this concept of going east towards Eden and the connection to Eden being used so that when the Messiah comes, the Messiah embodies the East as paradise. The Messiah is the gate, the door to paradise. His body is the bread of paradise. He is, in essence, paradise, right? He is the paradise in person, if you will. And so you see this language developing later in Luke chapter 1. This is Saint Zechariah in the Nunc Dimittis, the song about St. John the Baptist, where he talks about the Messiah through the tender mercy of our God, with which the Orient from on high has visited us. So the day spring or the dawn or the east from on high. East is east and west is west. It's not up or down. It's a horizontal. Why are we talking vertical? Because when paradise is no longer accessible to us, it's not on this plane anymore. It's on high. So the Orient from on high, or the Orient on high, this is a reference to the one who opens paradise, the one who is coming from there, from the mountain of remember paradise is, what do you see here? The mountain of God, right? Paradise is on top of a mountain. This goes back to the whole classes on paradise we've done before. All right, and then one of the beautiful hymns that we sing that uses this term Orient as well is at every ordination and every wedding. It is the hymn which is sung at the dance of Isaiah. The hymn is Dance, O Isaiah, or Rejoice, O Isaiah. A virgin is with child and shall bear a son, Emmanuel. So this is from the prophecy of Isaiah. And what? And Orient is his name. That's not from Isaiah. It's from Zechariah. So in Zechariah chapter 6, We've looked at this before, I think, in an earlier class, but it's usually translated in your Masoretic text. Behold the man whose name is the branch, who will come, who will spring up, who will build a temple, who will combine in himself both king and priest. So it's a messianic figure that's being mentioned very clearly in the prophecy of Zechariah. Branch is the term because it's something that springs or shoots forth. But the way it's translated in the Septuagint is, there's that word again, Anatole, the day spring, or the east, the orient. And so in the Latin Vulgate, it's translated as the orient. Behold a man, the orient is his name. So it's nothing about Asia involved here. So just so you know, it's completely this concept of the east from on high. And that's what Saint Zechariah, the other Saint Zechariah in the temple, the father of Saint John the Baptist, that's the one thing he's referring to. So Zechariah is quoting Zechariah, if you follow that. And in Aramaic, you see it's the same principle. The word there is not branch, but denka, which is their word for sunrise. So they understood it the same way. So every version except the Masoretic goes in this way. I don't know why. That's the choice of the Masoretes, but it seems to be the understanding throughout all the early manuscripts and in all the church Old Testament scriptures of understanding this concept of the orient or the dawn, the day spring. So Christ is the day spring from on high. He is, and that means more than just the dawning of a new light, but also the dawning of a new kingdom, right? Dawning of a new world that's coming through this. Okay. So we are, that brings us basically to the end of our hymn, which then tells us to glorify Christ our God. So why should we glorify Christ God for all the stuff in the Christmas story? What importance does it really have besides a chance to eat a goose and have presents and watch Tiny Tim? God bless us, everyone. Father Stephen DeYoung makes a wonderful statement about Christmas that I would love to see printed on a Christmas card. Christmas is an insurgency. Christmas is the beginning of an insurgency. Yahweh, the God of Israel, has come in person to the heart of a hostile world, ruled over by hostile powers. This birth is discovered by the enemies of God only after the fact, through the star, and when discovered, leads to an immediate attempt to slay him before the unknown plan can go forward. So they know something's up. They try, they fail. In 12 days, an open declaration of war will be made when the new Joshua, because remember, Jesus is from Joshua, the name Joshua in Hebrew, crosses the Jordan to enter the land at Theophany, and Christ reveals himself publicly to both hostile forces and their hostages. The final battle will come when Christ invades the palace of the devil's kingdom itself in Hades, before rising from the dead and destroying the power of death in order to reclaim the nations.
That should be a Christmas card.
Yeah, right? Christmas. Yeah, right. Christmas is an insurgency. It's not to be, and of course, here's the Theophany icon. And again, notice the parallels in the structures of the icon. You have the same kind of triangulation effect with the mountains, and then the womb in this case is the water, which is the thing from which Christ is being reborn. And you have the angels attending, and now you have St. John the Baptist, who's in a sense the birth giver of God in theophany through the baptism, which is a weird way of thinking about it. But and again, underneath now you see the river gods being cast out and destroyed and so forth. And of course, this icon I picked out especially because it also has all the stars above. So again, a parallel set of symbols, a parallel set of images reflecting the same theme over and over in new variations. Father Stephen is not done though. St. Ignatius, he says, reminds us that the nativity is the first shot fired. Yahweh has come to visit his people, and though he is an infant in a feeding trough in a cave, he has come as a conquering king. He has not only entered in his creation in some sort of abstract and philosophical sense to bring enlightenment, he has invaded it to take vengeance upon his enemies, the enemies of humankind. He is born to destroy those who have taken us captive and to set us free. He is born to crush the one who wields the power of death and grant us unending life. May you have a very metal Christmas. Thank you, Father Stephen. I love this reflection on the Nativity. If you'd like to read more, that's the name of the article on his whole council blog, St. Ignatius, the Nativity and the Heavenly Hosts. Just look up Nativity. There's only a few articles in that blog that has that. But it's just an incredible, powerful, beautiful understanding of what the Nativity is in the context of this whole story and narrative that we've been looking at through the religion of the apostles. We've fallen so far from understanding the real power and the majesty of God and what he is doing through this economy of our dispensation. And so, again, I wish you a very Merry Christmas. This is again, the wonderful nativity icon, bringing all those things back together again. And I would like to share with you as a closing, a little video from YouTube, because of course, one of the things, I just went last night to my daughter's holiday concert, which was very Christian. They had a lot of Christmas carols, and the main masterwork was Jubilate Deo, which was very religious. So there's a lot of Christmas songs going on. There's a lot of religious songs going on right now. And of course, we just naturally associate Christmas with songs, with singing, and we'll do a lot of singing, and that's great. But most of those Christmas carols were only written within the last 300 years. Many of them less, right? And most of the ones like Last Christmas, I gave you my heart. Those are very recent in history. What did they sing about for Christmas back, not in the time of the apostles, because we don't really have too much on that. We have the Psalms that they probably would have sang, frankly. But what were the Christmas hymns of the church once it started celebrating Christmas on December 25th? And so I have for you a beautiful, if I can get it, beautiful hymn here that I love to play every year. And I think this is hopefully going to work. Folks at home, let me know if you can hear this.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, enjoy.
اليوم يولد من البتول الضابط الخليقة بأسرها بقبضته اليوم يولد من البتول الضابط الخليقة بأسرها بقبضته.
I'm sorry, everybody. It is not sharing for the class here, so I want to get it on there for you guys. Pull up the Zoom.
We could see it. There's just a gray spot along the top.
You can see it, but the people here can't see it.
Oh,
Okay. It's because I'm going to close this out.
Just take this to your desktop.
There we go. All right. Here we go again. All right, I'll close this.
اليوم
There we go.
يولد من البتول الضابط الخليقة بأسرها بقبضته اليوم يولد من البتول الضابط الخليقة بأسرها في قبضته اليوم يولد من البتول الضابط الخليقة بأسرها في قبضته الذي هو بجوهره غير ملموس يدرج في الأقمطة كطفلين الإله الذي ثبت السماوات قديما منذ البدء يتكئ في مزود الذي أمطر للشعب منًّا في القاف يقتدي من الثديين لبنًا ختن البيعة يستدعي المجوس وابن العذراء يستقبل منهم الهدايا نسجد لميلادك أيها المسيح نسجد لميلادك أيها المسيح نسجد لميلادك أيها المسيح فأرنا ظهورك الإلهي
send a link out to that.
Yeah, I usually post it on my Facebook too. So I mentioned earlier that much of the hymnography and the iconography was in its special way derivative from the resurrection services. Do you recognize this hymn from the resurrection services? From the Holy Week services, I'll put it that way. Anybody know where it comes from? So on Holy Thursday evening, the service of the Passion Gospels has what are called the antiphons, which just means hymns. There are quite a few of them because there's 12 Gospels. And at the 15th antiphon, the same pattern is used there. Today, he who hung the earth upon the waters is hung upon a tree. And in the Byzantine tradition, during that, that's when the priest will take and carry from the altar the cross through the church, singing this hymn in the same melody, basically, as or close as I can pull it off. And then installing the cross, raising Christ up on the cross to represent that point in the story. And it's pretty heartrending.
How was
But-
when you were, sorry for interrupting, when you were holding the cross, you were singing something.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So this is doing the same melody and the same poetical structure to make the same kind of comparisons. And you can't, once you know the resurrectional one, when you hear this, you can't help but immediately think of that one as well. And it just conflates all of it into one story. It's just so incredible. So, yeah. I don't know at what point, it's probably going to be the Matins of Christmas. So I'll see if I can find it and sing it on, because we'll have Matins that day for Christmas. But anyway, I thought you might enjoy it. Oh, did I kill everybody? Are you there? Who's the what?
We're here, we're here.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, we're here.
Okay, you disappeared from my thing. Okay. All right, well, thanks everybody. It's just about 9 o'clock. I hope you enjoyed the class tonight. A little special Christmas interlude for everybody. And hope you find some joy in your Christmas, but also remember the awesomeness of the feast that you're about to celebrate.